ever wondered what crosses the mind of young Americans when they think about their ideal president? What are the everyday issues that matter? Is it the medicine costs or the rising house prices? And do cultural idols influence their party preferences? Join me in unwrapping this wish list for the perfect leader that's on the minds of young Americans. I am Mugdha Goyal, and you are listening to the News Spark. So, good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good as well. So, I'm going to start by, just saying a few things about you.
Mhm.
Uh, so, Mark is a savvy young professional and very much politically aware. And when it comes to political and societal know-how, Mark kind of, ranks higher than most of the people his age. So I feel, that comes from his love for books. I feel like, Mark, you're a walking, talking library. And of course, you're an American citizen. So, I'm so happy that you are here to answer my questions about US elections and policies. But Mark, first, would you like to say something about yourself for our listeners?
So I wrote up a very brief introduction about myself. I'm
Okay.
36. I'm from Maryland in the U.S. I work in IT. I work at a help desk. I have a bachelor's degree in English and one in information systems. I know if it's necessary, I generally identify as a Democrat politically.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Okay, so I'm going to start with my first question. Okay.
Mhm.
Since you identify as a Democrat, right? Um, People are aware about Obamacare, right? That's the one of the key discussions for U.S. elections. We always talk about Social Security, Medicare. So, Mark, can you provide me a comparison of the medical costs in the U.S.? You can use an example from your personal life. You can tell me how the medical medicines bills affect you under Biden or the Trump administration.
In general, under Biden, things seem easier than under the Trump administration. Unless I'm mistaken, a lot of prices did go up under the Trump administration. I don't want to get too into it, but I have a pre-existing condition. So Obamacare was very important to me because it would have been very difficult for me to get health insurance after turning 23 prior to Obamacare. Trump did make a point of trying to spin Obamacare as an insurance company bailout
Yeah.
when they were trying to change the way that funding was allotted. And I don't agree with that at all because it's very much the only reason I really have health insurance.
But Trump also seems to be making, many policies surrounding healthcare. Do you think that, is helpful in any way?
Um, my understanding is that oftentimes when um, questions about an alternative to Obamacare comes up and things like that, the Trump administration would present, I forget the word for it, like directives that Trump would sign and say this is going to be the case. And although sometimes things would be started in a certain direction, there was never a clear plan to change or augment what was in place to make things better for people.
Hmm. So you're completely dissatisfied with what Trump has to offer in.
The Republican Party in general has not been amenable um, to kind of bettering the health insurance situation in the United States, in my experience.
Okay. And do you feel the medicine prices that you talked about, do you feel it is like overall with all the general medicines, or is it about some special ones that you feel?
I mean, there are things that I'm aware of because I'm online all the time. I'm not diabetic, but I see a lot of stuff about insulin online that seems very important at the moment. For me, health insurance is expensive. Health costs are expensive. However, it's certainly much better than not being able to get health insurance, which would have been a very real possibility prior to Obamacare.
Okay, understood. Okay, so let's talk about jobs. Okay, so you're a young American in the IT industry, and every year US hire many Asians, Chinese, other nationalities, right, in the IT industry. And being a young working American, do you personally feel that there are enough jobs for Americans? Do you feel so or not?
Um, in IT, I have never felt that there were not, or I have never felt that there were either too many IT workers or too few jobs.
Okay.
I had a lot of difficulty getting started in the field, but I don't think that's as a direct result of immigration or anything like that. Um, in my experience in my field, there are a lot of immigrants, but it seems very strange to me to approach that as a problem. It seems more just kind of a function of the way things are.
But don't you think that, Republicans are in favor of protecting the American jobs, and Democrats just seem to avoid, welcome skilled immigrants from other countries? Don't you think where would the Americans go if, this keeps on going?
I mean, it seems that the jobs that immigrants are taking are not really jobs that are being taken from Americans. IT
Can you
work in general.
explain that? Explain the statement.
So when it comes to um, computer engineering or program engineering and things like that, that's a very specialized type of field.
Yeah.
And so that's something that you would want to attract people from wherever for that reason. It's not nothing to necessarily be afraid of. Um, my job isn't perhaps that technical, but it is in the computer industry, and it has some of that present as well. There are a lot of certifications and degrees and things like that. So in my experience, jobs that domestic citizens either can't or won't do shouldn't be something to fear. You should be welcoming people to do that work.
It's just about the IT sector you can vouch for, or do you think, like, what about the other professions? Do you think are they being attacked from
I
politics?
mean, basically, there aren't a lot of Americans who want to do that work.
Okay.
And so I kind of assume that might be widely applicable. There are things that are either more difficult than the average person wants to do, or either because of training or because of job conditions.
So you think that some Americans are in a position to decline doing jobs? Like in this world,
Um,
like everybody is, saying that there is like lack of jobs, and the country is
I
in
think,
employment
well,
crisis.
I've heard that unemployment is actually in a very good spot right now.
Okay.
I think perfect employment or something is around like 4%.
Mm-hmm.
So they expect basically 4% of people to be unemployed due to job changes and so on and so forth. And I think we're actually very close to that at the moment, but I can't provide a number.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not saying that there aren't problems with jobs. I'm experiencing issues due to inflation that I'm not happy with.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I mean, I kind of wouldn't be surprised if many people did not want to go through the work to get qualified for certain jobs. I don't want to say that too strongly because I recognize that there are people who do not have the opportunities to pursue certain things. But from my perspective, fear of losing my job because of immigration seems like nonsense.
Got it. Okay. No, good to know about that. Right. So, okay. So you are of the opinion that, we should welcome skilled immigrants, and it's good for the
Yes.
economy overall, right? It's not attacking your job per se, right? But
Mhm.
what about the illegal immigrants? They might not be skilled, right? They might not have the desired qualifications, yet they are taking up the jobs. They're settling in United States. What do you have to say on that?
Um,
Like,
well,
as
I
we see that.
recognize
Mhm.
that it may not be the ideal situation. I do think that a lot of the fear around illegal immigrants does not make a lot of sense.
Okay.
As I mentioned with the agricultural industry, for instance, it's very important to have those extra workers. I know it caused a lot of problems in Florida when DeSantis started to enact certain kind of restrictions more
Mhm.
recently.
Yeah.
So I think that oftentimes undocumented workers face undue discrimination.
So, but just welcoming anybody who's fleeing war, or maybe, just their country is unstable, do you think every worker should be allowed to just come to the United States? Democrats always seem to make policies, which favor immigrants, refugees, basically.
I think that our
Don't you
policy
think
of
there should be
compassion.
stricter laws around illegal immigration?
Right. I think a policy of compassion would be the best approach, but I recognize that it's unrealistic to simply open borders and permit everybody who would like access to a country into the country. I think that could be potentially dangerous and so on.
Okay, got it. Okay. Mark, since we're talking about, if there is like, we talked about jobs, if domestic workers are taking up jobs with Americans, we also talked about immigration. What about citizenship or birthright? So, what I want to say is Donald Trump and DeSantis, okay, since you spoke about him, they want to revoke birthright citizenship. Okay, because they're saying, the right of every person born in the US to be an American citizen. This is the law right now, right? And they are against it. They complain that like even babies born to undocumented people, they become citizens, right? So don't you think that is the right thing to do?
So unless I'm mistaken, birthright citizenship is part of the Constitution.
It
So,
is,
so
yes.
for all intents and purposes, that's going to be the law of the land, and I support that. I think that that's kind of the backbone of American law. So I think the Constitution should be regarded as a living document and should be allowed to be changed, but it needs to be respected up until that point. I do think that the idea of revoking birthright citizenship is likely a fringe position. Um, I I recognize it might sound good to a certain group of people, but I think it's largely an appeal to white nationalists. I don't think it's likely that if either Trump or DeSantis were to become president, that birthright citizenship would be revoked, at least in the immediate future. My understanding is that many countries have something similar to birthright citizenship, if not that exactly. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, even if there is not birthright citizenship, it's rare that the requirement would be that, for instance, both parents be citizens. It might be like one parent is a citizen or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Um,
to me, it just basically it seems like a kind of a fringe position. I'm not sure it's realistic to fear it exactly.
okay, so you're saying that's constitutionally not possible, right? It's a
I
constitutional
believe it's
right.
impossible. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Got it. Okay. But then, for example, the US Constitution also says that you have the right to protect yourself, defend yourself. And that's when Republicans say that, I need to be able to carry guns. That is my basic right granted by the Constitution. So then why are Democrats against that?
I generally have a bit of a fear of firearms. I have military family, so hunting and gun usage and things are not terribly foreign to me. Um, that said, I don't think without the proper legal procedures, it's something that should be revoked. Without, I don't think it's a situation. I like I said, I spend a lot of time online, and you see people who are gun advocates who are afraid that Biden's going to take all their guns suddenly or something.
Mhm.
If that was a real possibility, I wouldn't support that. I think there should be a legal procedure, and that would need to be something that would need to be regulated and done properly. If somebody were to restrict access to guns. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so but don't you think there are regulations in place? There are minimum age groups that are like, you can have this rifle by this age, and then there are rules, and some of them are federal, some of them are provincial, state guidelines as well. So
I would say that I believe there is a more pressing concern with the public shootings that are happening in the U.S. and apparently very few other places to address that problem more quickly.
mhm.
So again, though, I would still think it would be necessary to go through proper legal channels and things like that, but yeah, that's why that would concern me.
Okay, got it. Yeah, sounds logical. There seems to be loopholes, right? US, in comparison to other countries, have an expansive gun policy, and you feel like, there needs to be more checks on that. Okay, got
Right.
it. Understood. Okay. Speaking of guns, okay, I just this just came to my mind that there are American voters are embracing some of the American voters are embracing bans on sex gender discussions. Also, there are companies which are being punished for making LGBTQ statements. So there seems to be a growing trend among American voters where they're making crucial decisions based on these aspects, right? So what do you feel, what factors do you think plays an important role in deciding whom to vote for, like for the American voters? uh, uh, there are important topics like healthcare, healthcare, and then maybe about jobs. But then there are there are Americans who are worried more about banning abortion, banning these gender discussions. So where do you think population is heading to?
Um, I saw a news story the other day that said conservatism was trending among high school males. So I don't want to definitively say that the country is headed in a more progressive direction. What I do know is that compared to many other states, Maryland is very accepting of the LGBT community,
Mm-hmm.
and generally more progressive in that direction. Hearing some of uh, the language that comes out of figures like DeSantis to me is mind-boggling. And I don't totally understand that discrimination, but yeah.
But apart from LGBTQ rights, for instance, there have been like debates that they want to, whether or not to remove studies about African Americans, from school children's textbooks, right?
Right. I
Change
mean,
the syllabus and.
I understand that certain things are being proposed, and that certain things are the situation in Florida, for instance. A lot of this comes down to DeSantis because he's kind of an extremist and
Mhm.
enacting very extreme laws in Florida. Florida does seem to be suffering as a result of those laws. I did read something the other day about a quote unquote brain drain in the educational system in Florida. And I heard a news story the other day about kind of a small but prestigious college in Florida that's kind of being revamped by DeSantis, and a lot of people are upset about it.
Mhm.
What was the question again?
Yes, yeah. So why do American voters, have these bases for deciding whom to vote? Don't you think there are other
Um,
pressing issues that, might be more relevant? Like I don't hear, maybe in another country, these are not usually the topics. Abortion, for example, is overall, like I feel, is accepted in, many of the most like world's developed countries, that, women have a right,
right.
to abortion, in, severe circumstances, right? But like Americans are still debating about, whether this to include in their textbooks or not, whether to make, whether to have gender discussions in schools, whether to have
Yeah, I
education in
mean,
schools.
I think that like the gender discrimination is kind of on its way out.
Mhm.
I understand there's a backlash right now, but I do feel that ultimately things are on a pretty clear trajectory. Um, there are things involving the LGBTQ community that are becoming more well known. The issue, the struggle for civil rights, things like Stonewall that happened, I think, in the late '60s. Like those
Yeah,
things were not very well known until more recently for a lot of people. Um, but for one state to react very strongly against that does not to me seem like it would be something to fear for the entire country.
got
And
it.
it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that problems aren't being created. I'm somebody who does not agree with those discriminatory policies, but uh, yeah,
You seem to be pressing more on Florida. Do you think there are not other states which also might be concerning?
I think that, well, the reason I keep mentioning Florida is because it's in the news a lot lately because of
Okay.
DeSantis,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he is kind of the most vocal person for that. The claims that slavery benefited Black Americans, for instance.
yeah. Hmm.
I think Tim Scott was even upset about that, the conservative Black guy from South Carolina, I think. Um, and he's been fairly in lockstep with the Republican Party. So I don't think that that's a universally accepted position. I think there are people who absolutely believe that, but I don't think that's going to go beyond being a fringe position, even if it's frightening to hear.
Got it. Okay. So you're talking about DeSantis, okay, and you are a Democrat supporter. So do you think Biden is going to face a competition from any of the Republican candidates? And if yes, then whom do you think is, going to give him a fierce competition? Is it Trump? Is it DeSantis? Or is it somebody else?
I completely believe that Donald Trump is a political threat at the moment. I have never supported Donald Trump
Mm-hmm.
in any real capacity. I never was into the memes with Donald Trump and thought, oh, at least it'll be funny or something. And then policy wise,
Yeah.
I'm kind of politically aware, so I had strong opinions about a lot of stuff like that. Um, he does get support from like half the country. Uh, a lot of people, and people I talk to, think that his presence in the White House was a detriment to pretty much the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
But half the country supports him. So
That's true. Yeah.
yeah,
People don't
and
even care
I hear
about his
often on the news.
indictments or anything.
I hear often in the news people talking about how he he's not affected the same way by negative press that most politicians would be.
Mm-hmm.
So for many politicians, if you were facing criminal indictment and 500 years in prison or whatever it is, it's a huge amount of time. That would be the end of the political campaign.
Yeah.
he's still running, and
He's
people are
contesting
still
for the
supporting
next
him.
one, yeah. So that's
Yeah,
completely opposite, yeah. But then
yeah.
when you say half of the Americans are supporting him, do you feel like maybe when you're with your colleagues, among your friends, do you feel the environment, how is the political environment like among, the locals? Do you feel like things get heated up, or do you try to avoid political
I
conversations?
generally don't talk about politics at work. I don't know what my colleagues feel. It's kind of none of my business. I'm more open to talking about politics with friends and things like that. Um, Most of my friends agree with me. We are of a like mind. Um, Maryland is kind of on the Mason-Dixon line. You know, it's not exactly a southern state. It's not exactly a northern state.
Mm-hmm.
It's not prevalent, but there are near where I live some people with extremist opinions. You do see the occasional Confederate flag outside somebody's house, even though it's not everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to give the impression that those aren't ideas. But my personal interaction with a lot of those opinions is very minimal.
Got it. Okay. And I think like in today's time, people tend to be aggressive about their opinions, and kind of like when you're having like family dinner and if your opinions clash, it just gets awkward. Do you
Mhm.
feel so, like you said that your friends generally are like-minded? Do you feel people make like politically like-minded friends? So I'm
I think
talking
it really
about,
depends
yeah,
on the person. I think in general, yes, but I have definitely met and known people who actively go out to interact with people who are very different than them.
Mhm.
And to some extent, I like to do that myself, although regarding certain things I'm more sensitive to. So a specific political opinion might offend me more than something else, you know what I mean? But in general, I think people probably gravitate toward one another um, in a like-minded way. I'm not sure that's necessarily 100% problematic either. I read somewhere, I think it was the New York Times, that like online echo chambers are less severe when people are kind of allowed to uh, sit with their similar opinions rather than
Mhm.
constantly be faced with something that is completely opposite their opinion. And
Yes.
when they're faced with something that's completely opposite, they tend to recoil. So they might become more extreme, for instance, when they're faced with that difference. So I don't know how to make sense of that exactly, but yeah.
They might be, yeah, but much better, like, sometimes. Okay. So last question, before we just finish off this interview. Um, so you are a Democrat, but I want to know that like there are people who are criticizing Biden. They might believe in the Democrats' ideology, but they feel like Biden is too old or he's not fit to be the president. And so, do you think there is any other Democrat candidate, or whom you feel, can also be, fit for the president elections? And do you think there is anybody out there who might be giving competition to Biden?
At the moment, I don't feel that I know enough about aspiring presidential candidates to really say anything about that. My own opinion with Biden, I know some people who are more left-leaning Democrats don't particularly like him a huge amount, and in many ways, I do identify with that kind of wing of the party.
Mhm.
But um, I don't have huge issues with a lot of Biden. I remember, for instance, that before Obama came out in support of the LGBTQ community, I think Biden on a 60 Minutes interview said that they were going to support a law that gave more rights to the LGBT community.
Yeah.
And that was before Obama. And as the vice president, he came out and said that. So it's kind of like controversial at the time. So I mean, there have been things that Biden has said and done that I very much support. I don't like that Biden is nearing 80. I would like to see a younger political candidate. Um, I'm from Maryland. I like Jamie Raskin,
Okay.
who's from Maryland. I do. I know he's got cancer or something, and not in a situation where he's trying to expand his political career.
Mhm.
If somebody more like Jamie Raskin were to run for president, I would be interested in that. But I don't know how someone navigates that world. I don't know how somebody rises through the ranks of politics and becomes a potential president. I have no idea how that works really.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't know who to suggest or to look into aside from Biden. I feel like Biden is the choice. I can choose Biden or Trump, and to me that's a very
Yeah.
clear choice.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that there aren't things about Biden that I wish were different.
But thank you so much, Mark, for this interview, for answering all the questions. And it's so good to have somebody politically aware, and so good to know, the opinion of American voters out there and their openness and, in welcoming immigrants, refugees, making what America, stands for. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure interviewing you.